Hey folks, welcome back to Breakdown, the poet and the poems, a show, a conversational show where a poet breaks down poetry as inspiration for our everyday lives. I am your host, Tamara J. Madison, and for episode 2, I am excited to bring to you Dr. DaMaris B. Hill and her book, A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing. Ooh, child, let me tell you, this book, these poems, this sister are all fierce. And I do not say that lightly. I do mean fierce. And I really hope that this interview inspires you and empowers you to be courageous for yourself and for those that you love. So, you know how we do. Go ahead on and grab that cup of coffee, cup of tea, your snack, whatever you need. Put your feet up and join us for this episode of Breakdown. All right, welcome to episode 2 of Breakdown, the poet and the poems. Thank you so much. Our guest today is Dr. DaMaris B. Hill, and she has given me permission to call her DaMaris. Thank you very much.
Thank you for the invitation. I'm so happy to be here.
Yes, and I get really giddy and excited about this kind of stuff. So if you hear me stumbling over my words, it's because in this platform right here, I get to go ahead on and be a fan. Today we are working with DaMaris B. Hill, and A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing. Yes. So to start off, we're going to jump right into the description of the book.
Okay.
And I like to read the official description of the book first. From Harriet Tubman to Assata Shakur, Ida B. Wells to Sandra Bland, and Black Lives Matter. Black women freedom fighters have braved violence, scorn, despair, and isolation in order to lodge their protest. In A Bound Woman is a Dangerous Thing, DaMaris Hill honors their experiences. And I'm going to stop right there, but I do want to mention to the audience and anyone who is watching, this book also includes illustrations as well as black and white photos and tiny descriptions, historical descriptions of the subjects of the poems. Now, the book has been nominated for an NAACP Image Award, Publishers Weekly Top 10 History Title for the season, Booklist Top 10 Diverse Nonfiction Titles for the year, Book Riot's 50 Must-Read Poetry Collections, and that's just a start. That is just a start. So this book is finding its way all over the place, including outside of the country. So I am really excited to have you here. Okay.
I'm so excited to be here.
All right. So I always try when I do, I want to show everybody this is my book, right? So you can see my homework and everything done on my book. And I always try to do like my own description for the book as an exercise as a writer. And here is my description for the book. And then we're going to jump into this conversation. This book translates the most often misinterpreted and fierce power of earth-toned women in the United States and their willingness to die that others may live more freely and abundantly. Okay? So I want to start by asking you,
Okay.
what does this book have for the everyday woman? The woman who's not a poet, the woman who doesn't consider herself a freedom fighter, a celebrity, or whatever, the woman who doesn't consider herself to be brave, courageous, or whatever. What does this book have for her?
Well, it has the experiences of our multifaceted lives as women. Women, being a woman is not a monolithic identity, or even though we may have responsibilities all in common, there's no one way to be a woman. And I think that is one of the strengths of the book, is that I try to capture the complexity of these women, both, the complexity of historical content, but the complexity of their resilience as human beings as well.
Okay, so how does poetry capture an aspect of their complexity that film doesn't, or that a history book wouldn't, or that a newspaper article wouldn't?
Okay, there are multiple ways I think that happens, but I'm not interested in being a historian per se because I'm not interested in using the methodologies that are almost exclusively Western in their construct to validate the existence of people that I care about, where more powerful people, socially powerful people, who have created these methods have also ensured that they re-inscribe some narratives of inferiority rather than narratives of equity, balance, and humaneness.
Hmm.
So history has always been interesting to me, but the rules and guidelines of being a historian were not were
Okay.
not interesting to me.
So
I'm
I want to stop you right there though,
Mhm.
because it brought something to mind. Even though we are reading a little bit about the background and the histories of these women, like maybe a paragraph or two or whatever,
Mhm.
you talk to us in the book like you sitting up talking to a girlfriend on the porch.
That was on purpose because I wanted it to be in a Black woman's vernacular or various
Hold on, hold
Black.
on, hold on. Say that one more time.
I wanted it to be in a Black woman's vernacular with a Black woman's tongue, a Black woman's caring, a Black woman's ethos in telling these stories. So we learn about some of these figures historically in isolation. Like these people ain't had no friends. Like these people didn't have nobody they cared about. But these people in the book are inherently linked not only through identity, but also through relationships of their work. And history does not often allow for those narratives in the same way. Those are narratives that you have to stitch together like a quilt or put together like a remix because those samples and those pieces of their lives are laying about and disregarded by historical narratives.
Hmm. Okay. So that's perfect lead in. That's perfect lead in because I want to give the audience an example of what I'm talking about in terms of how you speak to us. And I'm just going to go ahead and jump in and read this myself because this is one of my favorite passages. Okay. On page, what is it? On page 12, in the
Okay.
preface that you write for us in the book at the bottom, it says, "The afflicted pray for healing, just as hungry people pray for bread. But when has God ever sent bread? In my recollection of the scriptures, God has always sent a woman like Eve and the unnamed woman that preceded her, a woman like Moses's mother, Jacobed, I think that's how you pronounce that, and the woman who raised him to be a king, Bithia. A woman like Deborah and her skull piercing homegirl Jael. Maybe some manna, but when has God ever sent bread? Okay, so that is somebody sitting up talking to me with a cup of coffee in my kitchen, and we going in while the greens are cooking on the back of the stove, right? And all of that is pulled in. And one of the things that I love about this book is that you find some of these everyday women and you put them in there with Grace Jones and with Eartha Kitt and with, all of these other people. And I really loved that about the book because it speaks to so many different people. So here's what I want to ask you.
Can I say one thing real quick for you?
Sure.
Ask? Okay, I want to talk about Deborah and Jael because a
Okay.
lot of people don't understand what I'm talking about. But Deborah, of course, in the Bible is this great Hebrew warrior, this Joan of Arc in Jewish form. But she actually won that war because her homegirl that worked in the house of ill repute, homegirl that was a working girl, that worked in the brothel, when the general came in there, her homegirl JL just took a tent peg and put it through that dude's head. Went outside and was like, here you go, the war over.
And it's all a part of it. It's all a part of the
All
victim.
a part of solidarity
Mhm.
of women's networks, because uh, for a lack of a better term, the whorehouse is always supposed to be a place of peace, right? But if you love your family and you love your community and they are being tortured and you are left with little space for resolve, what kind of decisions do you and your network make to make sure that that space ends?
That reminds me of the discussion sometimes in our communities and in certain circles about the house slave and the field slave. And I've
Mm-hmm.
always thought to myself, why is it that people don't recognize that they were both needed? Because
And
the
working
house,
together.
exactly, because a house slave might have been putting glass in the food, right?
Mm-hmm.
While the field slave was doing something different. And people don't understand that all of it is a part of the change that is going on. And
Mm-hmm.
I appreciate how, like you said, you have so many different representations of what that resistance and what that freedom fighting for everyday humanity looks like.
Right. And what does it mean for the woman that you call on a hoe and a whore to save your community?
Hmm. 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 And you won't even say her name. She will not go down in a history book.
Mm-mm. It's a brief mention of JL,
Hmm. Hmm.
the
That
woman
would
that
have
said,
been
I
too much
got
like
you.
right. Too much
Right.
like right. Hmm.
Woman was like, I got you. This dude did what? Oh, I got you.
And quiet as it's kept. I'm not even sorry about it. Every family needs one. Every family, every family needs that one person that's going to be all right, I'll die for this. You know what I mean? That
Mm-hmm.
is a necessary part of what's going on. But what we don't do so well, like you said, is we don't honor that person and that person's contribution. That person often gets pushed in the closet or swept under the rug or what have you, unfortunately, and knows before even making that sacrifice that that's about to happen.
Mm-hmm. Or that there's a risk of that happening. Some other people say if you don't know what you'll die for, you ain't really living,
Mm-hmm.
you know? So I don't know.
Mm-hmm.
Not
Talk to
encouraging
us.
anybody to die, but you know.
No, I mean, it would be nice if that didn't have to happen,
Mm-hmm.
but we're going to leave that right there.
We are with this 500,000 people in the grave right now. Go ahead.
Talk to us about what bound means. We have to go there. Talk to us
Yeah.
about what bound means.
I mean, well, bound means all the negative connotations that first come to mind: of fettered, of oppressed, of held down, of held back. But it also means all of these beautiful and loving things, like bound in love and kinship, bound in romantic love, committed, bound in a book. And it means to spring forth, to be something new, to move from that space to another space. So that's why the word bound was just so important to me as far as this collection and thinking about my work as a whole, because when I really began trying to publish poems and writing seriously, I was very much a formalist. Oh, I love a form. I love a form. I love a classical form.
You can have that. That's not my area. Go ahead.
Look, I get in and I do that little waltz and that little Watusi and whatever else gonna happen in that little box. And I loved it. And I mean, I don't mean I loved it for a little while. I mean like maybe for 5 or 7 years I only wrote a poem. But
Okay,
then
hold on just one second.
yeah.
If somebody is watching this
Mm-hmm.
and this somebody is not a poem, explain to them what form is or form
Form
is.
is the classical expectations of poetry. So if it were music, it would be equivalent to a waltz, a funeral march, a national anthem, a ceremonial type of poetry that is widely accepted by people that speak English, particularly that ascribe to Eurocentric and classical aesthetics. Um, it is in many ways rooted in white supremacy, even though it has been reclaimed by many poets to be a space of liberation. I'm just talking about its origins, and in terms, if one believes in hierarchies, then one may believe that those are the highest forms of poetic mastery. Um, and I used to love them, not because I felt that they were the highest forms of poetic mastery, but the music and the lyricism of my childhood is rooted in the Methodist Church. So all of that is very formalized.
Mm-hmm.
And so those notions are familiar to the ear, to the heart, the rhythms. All of that was familiar to my childhood self that I trust. But when I learned how to break form, I found more pleasure in that.
So
And
would you
then
say the poems in this book break form?
some of them do. I mean, the second chapter all happens in form
Mm-hmm.
because those women are in prison.
Mm-hmm.
So I use form to kind of reiterate that the ways of speaking are also filtered through a hierarchical and a confining um, type of expression.
Okay. All right. So let's go to a poem. Let's
Hmm.
go to a poem. I want to go to, let's go straight to, I want to mention that the first poem in the book is Harriet Beecher Sproul Hill,
Hmm.
who is your personal ancestor.
Yes, blood ancestor. Yes.
Mhm. So I want the audience to know that you opened it up with this libation for an
Hmm.
ancestor first before anybody else is mentioned, which I think is absolutely precious. Absolutely precious.
Yes.
Would you read her piece for us, please?
Sure, sure. And as I'm reading this piece, it's also important for people to understand that this poem is kind of like is semi-autobiographical about our lives that we have together. My
Mm-hmm.
grandmother was diagnosed during her life with schizophrenia because she apparently, or she was diagnosed with hearing voices. I hear voices and I get to write poems about it, you know? So like, I think there's a contextual misunderstanding. She was also the only one of her brothers and sisters that didn't go to college, but they all considered her the smartest. My great grandmother, who was also very literate, named her children after American authors. So my grandmother was named after Harriet Beecher Stowe, um, and I've inherited part of that name. I have the racket of anxiety in my genes. It rivets in ink. Despite this, I leave these marks, this evidence of us undone. In which end it all ferments, and we shape totems of shame from our amusements. The musk of my imagination is as redolent as any untamed woman, and likewise mistaken for mental illness. Perfection is a mask, a perfume in my pulse. I learn to hide what is feared. To be literate is to pen oneself with needles, shape beauty from a funhouse mirror. This is how artists learn the craft of display. Call this confession a lie. Look closer. I stub my toe, tightrope walking, the lashes of circus clowns. Only the liberated can see the legacies of bondage stirring beyond the ribbons. I have come to know I am the savory morsel in America's teeth. These words are clawed into the enamel. My face is familiar among the haints. I wear her likeness like a call. See, I had a grandma who could read lightning speeds, now some Holy Ghost. The best life had for her was this country's secondhand soldier, a loving husband, no room for books and babies at her breast. The sanctified think marriage is a type of reward. If you are a second generation out of slavery, color of coffee bean type of woman, and your hair is the black lacquer of unruly licorice that has branches that wave like echoes. Her smile whiter than seashells, her breath the scent of tobacco, as narrow as a Carolina pine with the worries about the rage of white folks. She died gifting me her photos, the only story she would write. At birth, her name becomes my velvet lush heirloom. tucked it behind my mother's. It is costly to stay free and appear sane. I am she in an extravagant kind, a shimmy spilling from her buttons, the erotic unbridled, a glimmer riding the golden. I am her shrill of laughter, clapping in doubt. Curiosity is a coy friend, chaos my alter ego. I mistook a jagged molar for an ivory tower, and I ain't got the good sense God gave me to rock.
Okay, I just want to read these lines back. I stubbed my toe, tightrope walking, the lashes of circus clowns. I am the savory morsel in America's teeth, worries about the rage of white folks, the erotic unbridled, chaos, my alter ego. I remember reading this and thinking about how this is reflective of the lives of so many black women,
Mm-hmm.
right? If anybody can tightrope walk the lashes of a circus clown, it's us, right? If anybody's erotic is unbridled, it's ours, right? If anybody has worn the blunt and the rage and the bruises of the rage of white folks, it's us too, right? And so it's just really, really interesting, how even though you were writing for your grandmother, this shows up in so many of us still to this very, very day.
Absolutely.
And that was the reason why I asked the question early on, what does this book have for everyday folks? Everyday people. And I was really, really glad to see that you opened with that ancestry right there. So I want to move on to another woman that would be considered the everyday woman,
Hmm.
Ruby. Let's go to Ruby right quick.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite poems in the book. Um, I, 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 I like the imagery in the book. I don't like what happened to Ruby McCullum. There are elements of the story that I cling to and adore, like the fact that Zora Neale Hurston was covering this woman's trial.
Hmm.
Like Zora Neale Hurston ain't have enough to do in her life, and she was like, "Wait, this white man that did what? I'm gone." And then the Pittsburgh Courier decided they wasn't gonna pay Zora anymore. So Zora about her money, so she quit. And then as soon as the case closed, the day after, she published a story. I think it was in the Atlantic that basically covered the trial word for word and called it a fiction.
Hmm.
But she was determined to get that story out there, but also equally committed to not being exploited and equally committed to the solidarity with Ruby.
Hmm.
Like, you know how much intellectual dexterity that takes?
Hmm. Hmm.
And Zora was there.
So hold on, before you read the
Yeah.
piece, just a little bit of context for people.
Mm-hmm.
Just a little bit of context so we don't ruin too much of it about who Ruby was.
Mm-hmm. And we definitely need to talk about Ruby because Ruby was from Florida.
Hmm.
She was married to a man named Sam. They had a loving relationship, from what I can deduce. They moved to New York briefly up in the Lakes area. And while there, they learned how to successfully run an illegal numbers business. So they moved back to Florida and they have multiple legitimate businesses, but they also have an illegal numbers business that is allowed to operate because they are paying bribes to a number of police officers and officials in their town. A doctor, Dr. Adams, decides that he wants in on the bribes. This is prior to him running to be a state senator. He gets the bribes, he gets elected to state senator, and somewhere in between, he decides the money is not enough, that he got to have Ruby too. The money ain't enough, being senator ain't enough. He got to have this black woman too. Um, I'm unsure if the relationship was consensual. I am sure that power dynamics were at play.
Of course.
And this well educated doctor from a family that used to own other people pre emancipation decided that he was going to keep some of his Southern inheritances and rights and claim Ruby McCullum as a paramour, which is a concubine for his pleasure and his for his illegitimate undocumented family. And Ruby McCullum's third child was visibly his. Everybody knew. Um, and then Dr. Adams found himself dead on the floor of his office.
Oh my.
Oh my. Ruby McCullough was arrested. We don't know if she killed him, but she was arrested for his death. And while she was in prison, she also had a miscarriage. So there was possibly going to be further evidence of their relationship. And when you think about all that relationship was taking from Ruby, it was literally taking her life and her blood from her. It was taking the man she loved from her, creating distance with her husband. It was taking her financial wealth from her. It was putting her in a position to use her intellectual talents because she was supposed to be the brains of the business in aid of someone who wanted to maintain a hierarchy based on race. Literally, she's giving her blood through the offspring of a child through him. And when was his hunger for power and want and greed ever to be satisfied? What else do you want?
And her body and anything else that he could get. Right,
Right.
what else was there to want? That's the other question. And in situations like that, I think one of the things that we never think about is we have no idea, like you said, whether it was consensual or not, and
Mm-hmm.
what kind of threats may have led into, right? Because there's always that interesting pushing somebody into the corner. If you don't
And,
do this, I will do this. And if you
and
don't do
what
this,
couldn't a U.S. Senator do to a black man?
exactly, exactly. The
What couldn't a
business, the
U.S.
entire
Senator
family, right? And
could
there are
arrest the
so many situations like that that we will never know what the real stories were behind them, because those women did not get to speak and they didn't have any rights.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't
And
have
when she
any.
went to court, his first cousin was the judge. I think he
The
silenced
doctor's first cousin was the
the
judge.
doctor's first cousin was the judge. I think he silenced her something like 31 times. Wouldn't let her talk.
Okay, we got to read the poem before I
Yeah, we gotta read the poem. We get here mad, ready to fight, going down Florida, starting some stuff with some people that ain't even here no more. All right, Ruby McCullum. They lie. Say that Ruby and her husband Sam are Live Oaks Black, Bonnie and Clyde, but make no mention of her fine house with a pool and the ring of policemen swimming in her and Sam's pockets. I swear between Alabama and the Gulf, it's hard to keep anything out of a gator's mouth, out of a raccoon's grip. Some bandits are dirty as the devil, crawling into your yard, reaching. Greedy bandits treat an open window as an invitation. You find them fat and splayed salt and kings crisscross in your satins. They reach, crawling, clawing you close, whispering Paramore, threatening to tear any black man to pieces. These are the ways he is going to disrobe you, fit you to bear his rascals. A raccoon never retreats, not for threat of bait or broom. They will run you ragged, race. Ever wait to find yourself prostrate, Dr. Adams' floor, dressed for church, praying for a prescription or some poison? Ruby needed a bit of something to rid her of the little rascal scratching inside. No, who else would she call when a critter insists on living in her walls?
When a critter insists on living in her walls. It makes me think of the abuse of women's bodies, period, and that power dynamic over a woman's body in so many ways, whether
Mhm,
it's a black woman, brown woman, earth tone women, or a woman that's just poor, period, right?
mhm,
And the leverage that is used in those situations, and it occurs now, but in slightly different ways. One of the things that I thought was interesting was the term paramour,
mhm.
right? And the way that
Or
it
the
is
Herschel.
spelled. Paramour, and amour in French means love. And this has nothing to do with love, which I think is interesting.
And
Very
even
interesting.
what is like para, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like that is kind of a diminutive word or a
Mm-hmm.
diminutive morpheme, like little love, like of love,
Mm-hmm.
like part love,
Mm-hmm.
you know. But this is a whole system and way of being.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That was legalized.
Hmm.
All right, so we're going to move on over. I want
Okay.
us to move to Sandy right quick. I'm
Yeah.
sure most people who would take a look at this know of Sandy.
Hmm.
Would you read her poem for us, please?
Yeah. Sandy speaks a choral refrain. It could have been me, with 3 degrees creased into the front seats, bits of Constitution in my veins, like braille, the declarations tattooed inside my eyelids. How many times did Sally Hemings have to hear about them and affirm the tiny ego of Tom before he bears himself to his brothers, collecting their boastings, forgiving his debts? It could have been me. Like Sandy, I would have missed them dashes in the road. The ways I skirt around corners under the cover of sun, eye fleeting an interview, happy to have some means, pockets fluffy with promises. It could have been me, listening to gospel, the lumps in my throat running, and a marble fog above my lips. My car would be all cloud, a heaven, shaved with blue and red lights. It would have been me, my eyebrows high, voice low, questioning Encenia about his bidding. It could have been me, a black woman, the color of Oklahoma clay, a policeman pretending to be some cowboy. Sandy had been in Texas but a day. How long had he been hunting for one like her? And Senior seen this in his mind. It was a means of forgetting the woman that refused to love him and the black man she clung to. In this vision, he is a rodeo style hero. Sandy is a rogue rascal. He holds out his tongue to the shower of coins and praises. A black woman without a job owns her dignity. Did his fantasy desire that too? He mined it out of her back with his knees. History told him that he could squeeze gold from black woman's wrist with iron cuffs. Is that why he braided the noose to resemble a lasso?
It's so sad that power in so many places around the world is based on the ability to control and destroy,
Mm-hmm.
to control, destroy, own, and obliterate.
Mm-hmm.
That has been the definition of power for so long. Whether it was another person's body, another person's land, another person's resources, another country, another whatever.
Yeah, just kill him, right?
And if I can't have it, I'll just obliterate it in one way or another. Um, and we
And
have to find ways to change that.
mm-hmm.
We have to find ways to change that. All right. So for Sandra Bland and so many others, I just want to take that moment to pause
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I also want to say that it's important that we remember their lives and not just the last few moments of their deaths,
Absolutely.
their lives. And I think that that's something that you do with this book. You remember the lifeblood of these women, their vivaciousness, their fortitude, their the list goes on and on and on. You don't just remember their tragedies, you remember the fire within them. That is so very important.
Thank you.
Yeah. And in speaking of that fire, I want to end with light at the end of the tunnel,
Okay.
the recipe for a son.
Oh, sure, sure, sure.
Um, I think that piece is just very precious to me because it is a prayer poem.
It's definitely, and I think this was very closely written in form initially.
Mm,
It's an older poem. A recipe is for a son. And a woman whose skin tastes of honey, mold, brown sugar, and molasses, sipped in courage, siphoned from poplar tree ashes, set aside the angel's plumes. They will be set to his back, and diamonds, the stars in his eyes. A sun golden like fresh harvested grains, each a kernel cradled with compassion. Add granules of conceit. The palate will welcome the musky taste of truffle and name him noble. 40 weeks. Pray him resilient. Pray brilliance never bronzes. Make him forget he is mortal. Name him for the gods. Make him believe he is the miracle spun from an oracle's mumbling hand.
okay, I thought that second time around I wouldn't get teary eyed about this poem, um, but it is so important to me. It is so important to me because it reminds me that amidst all of this madness and all of this tragedy and all of this murderous destruction, there are people that are we still have the courage to bring life forth
Mm-hmm.
to this planet. And I love that poem because it is a prayer, it is a blessing, it is magic. You know what I mean? It is coverage, it's an anointing, it's so many things to cover and protect the preciousness of life despite all of the things that are out there. And I do want to let the audience know that you are a mother, so this poem
I am a mother.
is real personal. And there's a picture of you in the book, and you are pregnant with this
I'm
son.
so pregnant right there.
And so many, when we think about the things happening in the world these days, a lot of women could use that poem to hang on to,
Yeah, yeah,
just to get up the next day and to continue to teach their children to love and thrive no matter what. So
I
thank
still haven't told my son to be afraid of the police. I haven't told my son to be afraid of anyone.
you. Mm-mm.
I can't do it.
It's not going to do any good anyway.
I can't do it.
Why? Why?
Right. I have raised you to be a leader. Fear no one but God.
Hmm. Hmm. And like you said a few minutes ago here in the interview, if you don't have anything that you'll lose your life for, are you really living in the first place?
Are you living in the first place? I don't even really want him to fear me.
Hmm.
Fear is another type of oppression and suffering that I don't really want him to have.
Hmm. Hmm.
And like, I think a lot of Black parents are very strategic in the way they raise their children not to be afraid.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Because it doesn't do any good. And then there's too many things that can feed on that fear. So you might as well go ahead on and be fierce.
And the world is already trying to make them afraid.
Hmm. Hmm.
I intend for my child to live.
Hmm. Hmm. Absolutely.
I want to find.
So I want to circle back to that bound thing,
Mm-hmm.
right? This book binds us to that power, to live in spite of everything going on. I don't care who it is, what it is, or how big and bad it looks. This book binds us to the challenge of living in spite of all of that. Thank you so much, Dr.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. Thank you for inviting me to talk about it. Thank you for your friendship and always holding me down and being there. I appreciate you so much. Poet Madison.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I know you have a lot on your plate, a lot going on. So thank you for stopping by. This is a labor of love. So thank you for volunteering your time. We will make sure that we will get the information about the book out there. And
Okay.
in the meantime, folks, make sure that you read something. I have to say, to me, much of poetry, not all, but much of poetry is modern day scripture. So make sure you get you some, because it might help save your life. It might help you get up the next day. It might help you to make it through. So thank you for being a part of that journey.
Thank you.
All right. Stay well and courageous. And we look forward to your next project, whatever it is.
Thank you. Thank you.
Have a good one.
You too. Bye-bye.